So most of you folks are here from Arcata, right? Kind of. Okay. No. Oh, okay. I didn't mean it. Didn't mean to start anything. So you're always supposed to start off with a story, when you're speaking. So, everybody thinks LID is like a big thing in big cities and watersheds, but I remember when I really started this thing like 10 years ago, and I was giving this talk at a conference, and these people, this guy came up to me afterwards after he heard me talk, and he said, would you like to come to Warsaw? And I got all excited, said, oh, Warsaw, like somebody asked me to go to like Poland, And I said, well, and he started talking a little more. I said, wait, where's Warsaw? And he goes, oh, Warsaw, Virginia. And I was like, I've never heard of it. It's like down on the northern neck. He goes, we're a real small community. There's only about 3,000 of us. But we have a problem with our stormwater. And I said, what's the problem? I said, and he goes, well, we had to build these stormwater ponds because of the new shopping center we got in. We have a problem because everybody keeps putting carts, their shopping carts, and their trash in it. And we had some snakes in there, and they came back into the video store from the pond. And so we don't know how to maintain it or do anything with it. And so I was like, where is this place? So anyway, he said, come on down, and we'll take you to dinner. And, that's fine with me. So I drove there about 3 hours from my house. And beautiful place. The Northern Neck is a really wonderful part of the Chesapeake Bay, and so I met their town council and their public works department, which was 3 people, and they said this is really good. And we actually came in. It was like really the first LID ordinance kind of in the country. And it was this little town, and because they said, we don't have the ability to build all these big ponds, and we like the landscaping, and and so just to tell you that empower these small communities can really kind of do a lot. So. The snakes went away. So, I think they actually filled in the pond, but it was neat because they went in, they got some grant money, and they built some parking lots using it, and it was just this whole little program. It was really fun to do. So, anyway, I got a bunch of slides, but we'll stop every once in a while, and if we don't get through them, we can ask some questions. Hopefully, this is like that kind of day is define LID, talk about I call them issues and baggage. Because we all have issues in baggage, and learned that from a psychiatrist once. So, not that I was really going to, but he told me about that. So we want to talk about kind of existing systems, and how can we use this stuff, and then finally this going green, because everybody's green now. So, okay, here's we have any prizes? No prizes left? No prizes. Okay, but okay, no. For the regulators, we had prizes. So, okay, you got a prize? Got a prize here. So, who can name this city? Anybody? Oh, it's in the United States, but this is actually Philadelphia. But if you've ever been to Philadelphia, you say, yeah, it looks like Philadelphia. But this can be just about any big city in the U.S. It's pretty much paved, but when you go to like Germany, this is like a city that you might fly over. Okay, so there's a difference here. So how do you get like from one to the other? So that's one of kind of our challenges. And what do you get for it? And that's kind of a little bit what we're talking about. Well, everybody's going green now. You see the whole thing, and the oil companies, and everybody talks about Walmart, Kmart. They're all doing this now. And one of the things that's happened, traditionally you had environmental groups and environmental issues, and then on the other side you had kind of the development and engineering community. And there was always kind of like fighting each other. But what's kind of happened now is that builders and developers and engineers and architects and designers see this benefit, this kind of economics of promoting and using green technologies, green roofs, bioretention, landscaping, all this stuff. So they're seeing really kind of ways to make money using environmental products and features. And I think this has caused a huge problem in the environmental community because they haven't figured out kind of how to deal with it. It's like eating like a real cold ice cream cone on a real hot day. This brain freeze has occurred. And we have to really figure out how to really kind of work and really select how lots of this stuff kind of works. And that's kind of our challenge. It's a great opportunity, and I think Bob talked a little bit about that this morning and some of the challenges with getting kind of the environmental groups on board with this. So first thing is I want to just define LID because people go around and say LID is smart growth, LID is this, LID is that. And we really came up with 5 basic principles about LID, and we'd like everybody on the same page, especially discussing on. So first, it's kind of, we call this functional conservation, minimization of site impacts, strategic timing or maintaining watershed patterns, integrated management systems of these small-scale practices, and then pollution prevention. So it's really a process. It's not one thing. It's not a green roof. It's not a bioswale or whatever you want, a permeable pavement. It's really a process that we go through to look at how each individual site kind of functions, really looking at the volume, okay, of stormwater. We're really looking at this water balance approach where we really look at kind of a unique watershed. How does a sign really respond to a site or watershed issues is kind of a performance base, which we talked about earlier this morning, and how much can we kind of match and mimic water balances, treat pollutants using it, using natural processes, these kind of small scale controls to break up the energy, and looking at kind of the cumulative impacts of using multiple systems, things like disconnection, and really make things multi-purpose. For example, when you drive on a road, it's a road, but if a road is a permeable concrete with some filtering material underneath, okay, it has more function now, so there's some benefit to this. So one of the things that we'll talk about too is a little bit cost. And people say, well, it costs more, but there's some benefits either inherent to the design and the use of that land or kind of to the community that are really critical. And then finally, some pollution prevention. So just some concepts here. So everybody has, you know, everybody has conservation. You talked about like stream buffers and all that stuff this morning. And just every community has like special areas of concern. But what we want to do is make sure that we're not just segregating and isolating those kind of areas, but we're bringing that function, protecting that function through that conservation. So that's kind of the one thing. I'm going to slip over this slide a little bit, but you know, just to show you, I kind of like this. This guy is out here is called coving, which is really clustering. This is a California development. You know, we're always trying to make stuff in grid patterns. You know, land kind of goes like that, but you know, it's easier to just go in the computer, draw straight lines. And this guy's just taking a little bit more time, and just by kind of, he calls coving, which is really clustering. It's been around, but everybody has to rename stuff every couple of years. And you know, reducing some streets and reducing kind of the impact. So, you know, can we kind of work with the land a little bit more? And then minimizing things, you know, are there sensitive soil, sensitive vegetation? Can we disconnect watershed? So like, for example, here, you know, you could have taken, there's a little inlet here. You can't really see it. I don't have like the laser things, but there's, you can see the little depression. But a lot of times what people would do is just kind of put the inlet in the middle of the pavement so the water just falls and goes right in. But if you take it and let the grass kind of filter it out slowly, and you know, if it's a little bit of rain, it gets absorbed in that grass, and then it goes into the drain system. You're getting lots of benefits, both timing and reduction of volume and energy. And then kind of these integrated management practices. So like if you guys were to walk out in the woods and just kind of take a careful look at the way the ground is or in a natural system, it's just kind of like little depressions all over. And so we're trying to really create these in urban environments. So when the rain falls, it kind of stores and sits in these areas, gets uptake by vegetation or infiltrates, gets filtered. And then when you have a big rain, it kind of just starts to run off the site. And here's, you know, people say, well, you don't have it. A lot of this stuff exists in California. You have to kind of look at it, and we'll talk about this. This is over, that's Neil Shapiri's over in Santa Monica, where they have lots of good stuff going on. And, you know, this can be real formal or it can just be kind of informal. And actually that's in Arizona. And then finally, pollution prevention. You probably have some nice pollution prevention brochures. And pollution prevention is pretty tough to do. For example, you know, you could probably, here's a restaurant, this is in Toronto, and you can see, you know, they probably have things like don't wash your mats out and stuff by the restaurant. And of course somebody does it because every 3 months the restaurant has new people working there. So, you know, it's pretty tough. And like in Washington area, we have very transient population. So you can have, you know, 1 year 80% participation in low phosphate nitrogen fertilizer, then half the people move away because, you know, government changes or whatever, and so you have to do it again. So some things about LID, a couple of myths. So it's not land use or zoning control. This is really site design stuff. It's not an either or approach. What we're trying to do is give you new techniques, new thing in the toolbox. And it's not independent of watershed planning, okay? These are site design techniques. And the way we develop land, there's only some limitations You can look at, there's actually some really kind of neat studies that are starting to come out where they're looking at communities that just say, okay, we're going to just use a BMP approach to protect our watersheds. And what they're finding is that after many, many years, only very small amounts, 20, 30, 40% of the watersheds are actually covered by the management practices. So this is only part of it. There's other things we have to do like stream protection, restoration. We'll talk about some overarching programs like green infrastructure. And it's not the answer to everything, okay? So people go around the country, oh, we got to do LID everywhere, and it's the only way to do it. So it's part of the answer, I think. And some things it's just a water balance approach to hydrology. We're using the unit processes integrated into the site. And it's really, we're basing this stuff on science as much as we can. And just, where we don't have knowledge gaps, we're using really inherently what these processes do. It's kind of integrated, decentralized approach, and technology driven. Okay, so we want to use really good high performance technology, and in many cases, it will be the answer. So what's a site look like? Well, don't imagine all the buildings and stuff. Okay, everything you do has to relate to kind of the hydrologic cycle. That's kind of the key to this. And once you do that, and I think we were talking about this a little bit this morning, all this is stormwater. When you talk about volume control, when you talk about unit processes, cleaning the water up, you can look at this for source water protection, okay, recharge, filtering. We can look at it wastewater. I&I is a big, infiltration inflow is a big problem. And so it's really kind of a holistic, it really fits in this whole approach over time. And, this whole thing about processes, for example, we can relate this, obviously carbon and all that thing, and you can kind of use this too. You can look at the carbon balance, whatever hot topic is this week, and it's, a person's carbon footprint. I don't know about all that. I'm a water guy, but apparently you can kind of work all this into it because it's all, that basic kind of energy and laws of thermodynamics, all the stuff we kind of forget about when we're designing things. We're making water flow uphill and doing all crazy stuff, and it's even climate change. I found this the other day. I love this. So help us, Al Gore. We're stuck here on the ice. So it's good for global warming too, because trees and vegetation, and so I guess you can make it what you want. But I really want to just focus on the water aspect of this, please, if we could. So it all started really about 14, 15 years ago. I was kind of contracting, working on bioretention, which is the use of vegetation and soil mix to really treat pollutants and do it by uptake, by storage, evapotranspiration, and really looking at things, the soil vegetation complex. There's some incredibly great chemistry and water balance things we can do with that. And if you look, Alan Davis, there's lots of East Coast kind of researchers, and I think a couple West Coast folks that have lots of data, especially if you're looking at pollutant removal. And started about 10, 11 years ago. I was a little younger then. Really working on the first manual in Prince George's County. We've done a manual for Department of Defense, and everybody thinks Department of Defense is kind of bass-backwards, but actually we're working on now a policy that all stormwater on DoD facilities for the Navy will be, first thing they're going to have to look at is low-impact development, which is pretty huge. This is nationwide, so pretty kind of neat thing to do. There's been stuff out here. There's the Santa Clara stuff that people have been working on. There's, I think, we've done some work for the National Academy. So there's lots of different groups, Water Environment Research Foundation. So lots of different people are really interested in this from the scientific perspective and the management perspective. We actually worked on something with NRDC, National Resources Defense Council. So we're not an environmental group, but sometimes we work for environmental groups on science stuff. And I thought it was kind of interesting promoting development, NRDC. But it's how to do things in a more sustainable fashion. San Diego, so it's really becoming quite pervasive in permits out here. People are working on, and one of the things is just even the LA area, really looking at trying to, even if it's not LID, really looking at watershed and watershed functions and management practices. But this stuff's been around in California and village homes. I'm not going to go into it too much, but it's been around. And if you ever go to village homes in Davis, do people maintain things? Do they? I mean, you go walk around there. So there's obviously something going on right here with that. So, but if you really are interested, how many of you own this book, Design with Nature? Okay, everybody should own this book. It's like $20. Go buy it. But if you're really interested in watersheds and watershed health, Ian McCarg, he's a University of Pennsylvania guy. one of my heroes because he smokes and drinks all the time and still kind of did good stuff. He's a big partier, but if you really look, this is Machu Picchu. You know, it's you know, a lot of this stuff has been around, and a lot of stuff we're using, you know, quite frankly, it's always easier to steal stuff. But you know, we have to kind of put it in the context of how we're doing development and land use today and what the future is. But you know, Machu Picchu is a place, you know, up on a mountain, and you learn to use water there, because if you needed water, you had to go like down the mountain. And you know, I think we're almost at that point in our society that we're going to get in this infrastructure crisis. We need to use water much more wisely. And a lot of lessons about conservation stuff have been around. We just have to kind of make them to update kind of code. So kind of some issues in baggage. You know, traditionally we've been concerned with non-point source runoff, and this is my engineer's fountain over there. It's just sheer volume in systems. But you know, here's a good example of how LID site would work. Okay, so here's like this site. It's been around for about 15, 16 years, designed, LID was bioretention there. So some truck spilled some oil, okay? So what happens is that it goes into this site. Okay, obviously you can see something happened a little wrong here. And the pollutants are getting really absorbed in the soil plant kind of complex, and maybe they'll kill some plants, but it's kind of isolated in this one part. If it wasn't there, it would be down the river somewhere, okay? I mean, we have actually TMDLs near us in storm drain pipes because the pipes have cracked and the pollutants have just kind of filtered out. So, you know, and then we have new emerging stuff like trash and debris. So we kind of have continuing issues over time, but, you know, what we're realizing is that, you know, the whole thing here is how to protect aquatic resources, okay? And this is really difficult because most of our rules, regulations, analysis methods are done by engineers, okay? And I'm an engineer too, but my little personal story is I have an old car and I always try and fix it. And once I bought it to a mechanic, first time I bought it to him, I was trying to rebuild the carburetor, and he looked at me and says, "You're an engineer, aren't you?" And I said, how'd you tell that? Because he says, engineers think they know everything and can do everything. And you know, this whole thing is that we've become very, very specialized in our field and profession, and it's hard, even within the profession, you know, it's bridge engineer, hydrologist, wastewater guy, and we're trying to really understand some very broad issues. And it's very difficult institutionally, and we have to kind of work on that, and hopefully there's kind of going to be a field of people that are doing that. We're recognizing it, but we don't have the skill sets oftentimes to solve these problems. You know, and then stormwater and the relationship to groundwater. I mean, most people that stormwater aren't groundwater guys, and it's hard to get them together. And then we even have kind of new and emerging issues like, you know, geese. This is unintended consequences of ponds near us. You know, the geese come and they see a body of water and they hang out here and, you know, fill it with poop all the time. And you know, and then this is not a pond, it's a hazard, right? So it was interesting, there's this study, Jerry Marsalak, do you know him? You guys know him out of Canada? He had this really kind of neat study. He looked at ponds in urban area, I think around Toronto, and what he was finding is that, you know, all these ponds and lakes that people were using, well, you know, and they had fountains that were really nice, and they were actually spraying people with fecal coliform from the birds. So, you know, there's, you know, how do you manage this besides, you know, shoot the things and eat them? But, you know, we have to have wildlife management, and, you know, a lot of we have unintended consequences. And then, you know, everybody has good hydrology and hydraulics books. I mean, this is the way we've been designing storm drain systems and really capacity, right? And so we're really moving our model. You know, about 20, 30 years ago, Clean Water Act, and people interpreted that as water quality only. You know, really, and that's our kind of model. But we're really getting this kind of, some of these things like green roofs or pavements are amenities now. And that's very difficult kind of to deal with. This is our new model that we have to deal with. There's a really good book by Peter Starr, S-T-A-H-R-E. He's from one of those Scandinavian countries. Go buy the book. It's not very expensive. It's like 12, 15 bucks. Sustainable urban drainage. It's really worth getting. And then, you know, kind of what sustainable stormwater, you know, just kind of big picture is that, you know, everybody here, triple bottom line, that's like the new term. You know, what are the costs to communities? Everybody said, what's something cost? It's not cost. We have to move towards a cost-benefit model. I was talking to this developer. He's building a like $50 million project. It had green roofs and pavements and all this stuff. And I said, you know, well, why are you putting all this in there? I said, did the regulators make a difference? No, because everybody loves this stuff now. It's all green. It's all about the green. So, you know, builders, developers may complain about this, you know, cost-wise, but it's such an infinitesimal cost in many, many, many developments. And yeah, it may be $300,000 to build some of this stuff, or $400,000, but when you talk in context of a $100 million project, and what long-term for the community, it's pretty good. So some of our challenges, this is state-of-the-art urban design in America. And we all laugh, but if you look at probably all your local codes, you know, we kind of take it, there's 5–10% green space. So there's no hydraulic function here. And, you know, just all that energy pollution just goes right into that stream down there. And then we figure, okay, well, now we'll go to regional ponds and we'll control it. So what we do is we, you know, this is a big box heaven near me. And we have probably one of the best stormwater, Montgomery County where I live, it's about 1 million people. We could argue it's one of the best programs in the United States for stormwater, stream, habitat, and all that stuff, planning. But this is development near us, you know, big box heaven. So imagine how this is, a 1/4 inch of rain hits that. What comes off that, the energy and stuff. So it's going to just destroy everything downstream. And then we have this phenomenon, and you're going to have this here too. I mean, Arcata is a nice little place, but you know, America, there's some cities that are getting 10, 20,000 people, you know, a month, a year. Charlotte, North Carolina, I think they're getting like 50,000 people a year. I mean, we're getting a lot more people. And so, our infrastructure sucks in this country. I mean, our roads, I mean, that's it. I mean, we're, what, 500 million? That's trillions of dollars that we're gonna need that we're not investing in, okay? Because we don't want 10 cents more in a gas tax or whatever. But, you know, so we have communities that are like, hey, this is pretty nice, you know, it's one car, no cars, older 60s kind of community near us. So what happens with this is that about 3 families or 2 families will move into it, and it's got about 5 cars. And so now there's twice as much runoff, and you know, we have this all over the place near us, and we have whole inner communities. This is what's gonna happen because we can't drive to places anymore. Or, you know, this is actually near my house. It's in Bethesda. Because another guess, this is okay, I always ask this question. How much do you think that house would cost? You get a guess? Okay, real estate's expensive here. Okay, it's like $750,000 house. Okay, and it gets torn down and this gets built. Okay, so same thing, you know. I mean, actually, this was on 60 Minutes, this community, about, you know, what people were dealing with, because it's just, you know, there's nothing left, and actually you do get a toilet. They take out the Santa John, they hook up the plumbing, but you know, what are you doing when you're in the neighborhood? Your whole drainage system gets impacted, and there's lots of flooding and, you know, water quality issues. Or the newer traditional urban design, the TND neighborhoods, and you know, everything I say in America now is 4 stories high, because that's what building code will let you go without an elevator or to do masonry construction. These are all wood things, and someone will drop a match in it and it'll all burn up one day, which is what no, I don't miss that, but you know, where is any function, ecological function in these areas? And so what happens, because our stormwater regs say 10-year detention, you know, someone builds this underneath, and I'm not really sure what it does. But people can integrate this stuff. This is another development area. There's actually bioretention. That's, you know, and these are, you know, $1 million houses too, and you can look right into your neighbor's window, I guess, or whatever you want to, you know, it's pretty weird, but and it's got a brick front, the rest is siding. And same thing here. But see, we can start to really work with that. And just conservation alone doesn't work. We worked on this study in Reston. If you're into land use planning, you know Reston, it's like the poster child of the 60s for really great urban design and open space and buffers. And if you ever go to Washington, you need to go there, and don't drive in it because there are no street signs and you'll get lost and you may or may not be found. But it's all curvy and it's a very weird place. It all focuses around these 3 lakes, which are there. But when you look at the streams there, all big buffers, you know, 50, 100 feet, everything's totally destroyed. And you look and say, like, what's growing in there? You know, there's no fish or anything. There's some mosquitoes or something. And it's all because at the headwaters, just connectivity of storm drains, and the soils are fairly erosive. And so stuff goes back and forth and down cuts till it's armored, and all that sediment ends up in this lake, and you bought this nice lake house, and it looks gross. So, you know, it has to get every couple of years dredged out. So how does kind of all this work? Or, like I said, you know, the plant soil complex, just to flash this up real quick, we have all these processes that happen in natural systems that, it's not just collect, convey, discharge. It's, how do you treat and how do you use natural systems? And, we haven't done that really for stormwater. Wastewater, we've done it, but, we're really just starting to understand how all this works. And so to make this work, okay, how do you make these techniques work? Well, first thing is that you have local kind of land use, economic design requirements. Okay, if you're building a Walmart, okay, you need parking. Okay, everybody, you only use 3 times a year, but that parking 3 times a year is what makes that, store work. Okay, so you have to work with that. Okay, and actually we've worked with big boxes like Target and on initiatives to kind of make things more environmentally better or good or whatever. And then you need industry recognized standards. Okay, you have to have some replicability when you're designing stuff. Things like construction, ASTM standards or for materials. So you get consistency because, it's always interesting to me. You have a guy, a master's, a PhD, an engineer, design something in the office, and then you got in the field and you see who's building it. Okay, there's a little disconnect in there. Okay, I'm not going to go there too much because I don't want a lead pipe or something thrown at me. But it's difficult to make that translation. So we need stuff that's readily understandable and has some standards that somebody can benchmark. And then, we need local community codes and ordinances. We're talking about water codes and plumbing codes. Well, for LID stuff to work, it's really forcing communities to look at their building and plumbing, land development codes, and how do you integrate all this, okay? Because that's only going to work. Stormwater programs can only go so far. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you're stormwater, okay, I got my MPDS permit, and typically you're not coordinating a lot with the fire department. And so all these things, it's forcing people to do that. And it's kind of a difficult kind of thing, but this is what's really required. And long term, it's best for our communities to have some integration. I mean, we've gone from being very specialized to being, we're gonna have to like coordinate and understand each other's kind of functions. So once you kind of do those, then you can really start to develop this kind of localized, sustainable stuff and really understand the value community-wise, building-wise. And that's kind of what we're doing. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, we have all these rating systems, which I don't like, and I'll go into a little bit kind of detail about them. But here's how all this stuff, about 10 years ago, we started working the Navy Yard in Washington. Navy Yard's a brownfield site. It's got 200 years of pollution that it's dealt with. And so here, for example, here's a parking lot, we said. And I always say you can see the whole history of the United States in this parking lot. So if you see there's cobbles. So that bottom layer is where the ships came over and they used the ballast for pavement. Parking, it's pretty good at that, And then they discovered a lot of concrete, and asphalt on top of that. And all the black stuff is all the polluted from the oil leaks and spills that they had from the underground tanks. So very sensitive. It's a brownfield site. So we had to actually line these. We're not doing infiltration. We're just doing filtration here. You can see I was in the landfill business for a while, and that's why I don't recycle, because trash means money for me. It's hard for me to understand it. But, so we take this plant soil and we lined it in there. And so, we put these plants in, okay? And so the water kind of sheet flows and it gets absorbed and treated and filtered. And we have weird rainfall near us. Some years we get 40 inches, some years we get 20 inches. So here is a drought year, and there's a kid there, some smarty pants person, put a corn stalk in there. And I was really proud of this because it was like the best looking corn stalk in the whole region, because it was getting watered all the time. But, and the plants have come back, but this thing's never really been maintained. It gets, they forget, the DOD's been kind of busy, so maintenance hasn't been that much. But it's filled with cigarette butts and trash, but it still functions well and processes stormwater. So it might not look as nice, but works. And we did these things like bioretention in the box. We have a whole bunch of things there, and permeable pavement surfaces. And this is another thing. This is 8 years old. It's never been maintained. It's some localized clogging, but it works pretty well. Okay, so this stuff can work. So what we have to do to have really sustainable, we have to have implementation products. So let's just look at one thing: permeable pavements. Okay, so I'm going to just use blocks, but this applies to like the concrete products too, and a whole bunch of different. So it rains and kind of the water goes through the surface, and there's this gravel underneath, and some of it gets sloughed off to, it's detained and let go, or maybe if the soil's all right, it can infiltrate a little bit. But we can also have evapotranspiration. There's actually people who are forcing air through these systems. Pretty neat to do that. But more, we can coat these products like with titanium dioxide, right? So we can use it to address air pollution, right? For smog, can absorb some smog. Heat and light, so different colors, right? Smog, like I said, reduction. We can use it to trap trash. People do smoke still. We can use it for safety considerations. Always like that picture. I don't know how they did that. But there are certain things we can't do. They're not really totally biological treatment. So you got dogs and birds and, these are another thing. I don't know what you do with stuff like that. But so when we have that, we can understand how to use it. Like, for example, here's Port of Oakland. It's 10 acres of this. And one of the issues was not only pollution prevention, but long-term maintenance, because they weren't having to asphalt. You got machines turning. So concrete's a great surface for that. And so you have industry kind of promoting and pushing that. And then the challenge is to how to get the states and get the data so they accept it as a management practice. But it's also kind of economic. But we're asked before, none of this stuff is 100% effective. There's no one system that treats everything. And there's going to be some residual. But, when you're finding studies and this stuff is going and treating, 95, 98%, 90% of the pollutants of concern, that's pretty good, okay? And the fact is that most of the time, this stuff is going to be fairly immobile if there's enough groundwater buffer and stuff. And that's the critical thing, okay? If you're generating pollution and there is a problem, we've projected and had some of these bioretention sites, maybe in 100 years we're finding enough concentration to even be concerned of them because they're so effective. We know where it is. It's in one place. It's not in the estuary. And that's kind of the critical thing I wanted to stress. And like I said, we can use this foundation for other things. If we right color, pavement, there's actually health, safety, all these kind of other issues. So you're saying, oh, that's East Coast stuff, but this stuff is popping up all over in the state here. These are some California picture of bioswales, gravel filters, bioretention, and it's just really getting the right plants. Part of the problem is that appearance equals acceptance in many of these things. So when you have, Joe engineering firm, and he's used to putting 3 shrubs and 2 trees and everything. And then you have something that has to understand the relationship of the plants and the water. So, it really takes kind of a team effort to kind of do this. And Greg and I have been talking a lot about this, a lot of this stuff's going to get built screwed up. And it will. And, but what's going to happen is that a lot of people will find out ways to do this properly. And that will raise the bar, because the bottom line is that people will know and recommend, and their businesses will promote it, and that's kind of what's happening. And so you have to get it out there and get things kind of moving along through pilots. And like I said, tree box filters, and so there's all kinds of opportunities. I like this because people think of green roofs as flat. And this is by Charlie Miller, he's the best green roof guy in the country. And I just thought it's kind of a real neat design. And then you can take it, and this is I think in Emeryville or Irvine, somewhere out here, people are learning how to build these and adapt them. So kind of how do you go green? Okay, one of those, this is close here. So, everybody's heard of this stuff like LEED, Spirit, Green Globes, okay, and they're all called sustainable, okay, right? So I don't think they're really that sustainable. I mean, these are point-based systems. So, you get the same amount of points as putting in recycled carpet as addressing stormwater quality. Okay. I've never really understood. They're not regional. These are meant one size fits all. I mean, every place is unique. There's no optimization. So you get that point, whatever it is, but what do you do if you exceed that? What opportunity, if you can really, really do something 90% rather than 5%, do you get anything for that? No. What's the incentive? They're not targeted, for example, at water quality. And then in many of the LEED systems, you can achieve it without looking at water quality. I don't understand how that is environmental leadership. And so LEED people hear me say that, they get really mad at me and give me bad looks, but it's okay, they need to be kicked. And so some other things is regu-copy, I call it. Somebody likes a stormwater ordinance and they just copy it and just pervasive across, something's developed in Wisconsin and then, oh, that looks good, we should make ours like that without looking at it. And consultants make money by doing stuff quickly. There's always, I call it agenda sizing, and this actually happens quite in bigger institutions, bigger municipalities. A lot of people have different agendas, right? So then we have kind of minimum standards approach. Okay, if you meet the standard, you meet that. So you don't really get opportunities to excel, all right? Zoning and building codes, all the zoning and building codes in the United States were developed about 1970 by Municipal Code Corporation in Florida, and they've just been the same thing. And, you know, so we're not, it takes a long time to change and get people to move along, but it does happen. 10 years ago, you couldn't make skinny streets, but then Institute Traffic Engineers came out with some guidance, and then people are getting more copy. And, you know, design industry is still a mass, you know, you see all these beautiful buildings in all the architecture magazines, but, you know, the bottom line, it's the 15, 20 lot subdivisions that make up most of the permits, okay, not the big village homes and kind of stuff like that. And like I said, per unit, so there's incentive. And like I said, LEED, I call it no builder left behind. I mean, I know all boat tide, you know, rise all boats float. Okay, and I get a lot of crap about it, but you know, I don't know. I mean, I went to school and got my master's in environmental engineering, and then someone gets a LEED certification course for 2 days. Okay, I may know a little bit more than, maybe I don't, but I just can't quite, you know, get that through my head, and yeah, I know. So, and then site design, and I've tried to talk to LEED people, they just ignore me, but it's fine. So sometimes, you know, when you don't want to address something, you just ignore it. And then site design performance versus BNP efficiency. Okay, we're not really looking at how something can, a land use or something can perform. You know, the environmental performance that we're saying, like, okay, let's throw some BMPs and they all work. And so we have to kind of, we know we have to get, and then no one reads. And it's true. I mean, if it's not 2 sentences in an email. So we're actually moving to this like fact sheet format. We're not even doing manuals for people anymore. We're just like, we having like idiot boxes, like do this, it's good. But we just have to make sure, we always put like, we always get reams of data behind it to justify it, but we have to do this. I mean, it's just the way it is, so. And so what we want to do is try and move our regulations to more economic approach. So I think that regulations can't get us where we need to do. But if you look at products, you know, like the permeable pavements I just showed you, okay, these people know that they can make money, okay, by having these products. Okay, the marketplace will, and if we come up with the right criteria for managing and for showing the performance of them and level the playing field, these things will come in, you know, and the best products will rise to the top. That's our kind of culture, right? That's the way it's supposed to be done. And we have to promote that. And like I say, the minimum standards really protect, and you know, economics and capacity, environmental capacity, and capacity of products and design techniques to do that. And then what are the true costs for installation of stormwater? Everybody says, what's it cost to maintain? I really don't like that question, because what I find is that no one maintains anything anyway, okay? It's just the way it is. And then if you look at, especially with proprietary devices, they'll, you know, it's like a loss leader. They'd probably give you the device if you asked them, because over 20, 25 years, that maintenance, if they have to maintain it to assure you that it performs over time, I mean, that way exceeds the cost of that $10,000 device. So those are some of the things that I think that we have to really start addressing. So how do you kind of do this? And one is patterns. There's a book by a guy out here, Christopher Alexander, Pattern Language. Anybody have that? You have to be two. Okay, there you go. Okay, it's a little kind of maybe outdated, and there's some kind of funky stuff in there that it's a little bit weird, but that's okay. It's some good ideas. But really talking about development patterns, which is really important. I mean, like I said, a Chick-fil-A is a Chick-fil-A, you know, and a Del Taco, I mean, there's a certain, so we have to understand and incorporate the environmental stuff in that. So, you know, here, for example, we took a very highly dense urban area and showed how kind of conceptually the water quality and volume could work within the different sections. And then somebody out here, this is a really good Coyote Creek watershed plan. You should find this and download it, because it's a really phenomenal document, I think. I was looking at the water balance on a larger kind of regional scale. And then once you do that and come up with some techniques, then this is High Point up in Seattle. It's getting a lot of kind of play in the landscape design stuff. And taking those concepts and putting in reality really isn't that hard. Or having high dense development with a yard. I mean, not everybody has to live in this kind of neo-colonial thing. I kind of like live in a house with a yard, because I can just take my kid and throw him in the back, you know, and lock him out there instead of letting him to the community park. I mean, there's some nice things about a yard. Or, you know, how do you make green areas functional? I mean, we have them, but we just sometimes do it. So, you know, for example, when we talk about like templates, we worked with a developer this place called there's a Central Park in Virginia. It's actually like one of the biggest shopping areas. It's really gross, but it's got every big box. And we work with a developer to show how to do these things. And you can see here, this is a bank, this is a chain, and this is my favorite kind of LID site in the West. It's the In-N-Out Burger by the Oakland Airport. So I get to go look at it and have an In-N-Out Burger, and I'm real happy about that. But here's buyer retention. It's pretty simple. It's just their standard parking lot, and they put the buyer retention in. So, corporate, and there's big benefits to that. And then, how to construct infrastructure. I'm going to talk about that in a little while. But this is a street in Seattle, C Streets, type in SEA, Street Edge Alternative Streets. It's a wonderful site where they've been building these pilots. And how many of you have heard it or seen it? So, and this is perfect for a small community. So what they did is they took a real wide street and they narrowed it down, put some curbs in it so people don't go 80 miles through an hour, and put all these buyer retention. We'll show you the pictures of it. So just to give you, this is what the street looked like, this perspective. So I always like this. And I'm horizontally challenged. I'm not a big fat person anymore. So, so here, we went from 48 feet to 14 feet of asphalt and a couple feet on the shoulder. And it's a really wonderful thing if you're ever up there to go look at. But what it does is they found it reduced volume, the kind of drizzly rainfall pattern there, almost 98%. So when you're in a CSO area or trying to recharge, that's pretty important. And people have taken care of all these garden areas. So how do you do this for builder and developer? So here we have these like new traditional, this is in North Carolina. And here, this was a kind of a neat thing my friend Bill Hunt at North Carolina State worked on. These little kind of dinky houses, and they're on real small lots. But so you have a pond. So you have really rolling topography. So you can't have centralized big pond. So here, for example, is a stormwater pond. But they said, if you use the LID techniques and some buyer retention, so what we can do, and permeable pavement, we can take that volume out of the pond and get us another lot out of there. So, when you're talking about $300,000-$400,000 house, you're talking about some money to do that. But communities across kind of the country, Chicago, bigger communities are really looking at this quote unquote sustainability. And the challenge is that, what do you do in a city? Well, everybody says, well, we can't, it'll take years and generations to rebuild this stuff and integrate this stuff. But if you look at cities around this country, we pretty much have rebuilt just about every city over the last 100 years. Except for a few historic buildings. So there's going to be opportunity. We have to start kind of doing this. Oregon's got, zoning bonuses, right? If you go green and use these techniques, and in many cases you have to do this because they have infrastructure, combined sewer, where they have already built $1 billion tunnel and it's not quite working well. So they have to reduce volume more, and this is the way to look at it. Actually, there was some pretty neat congressional testimony I went to the other day, and he was like, one of the councilmen was like, the House Committee on Science and Technology, we just spent $1 billion, and now, you need to give us lots of regulatory credit for doing this, because I'm not going to get elected unless you do this, because I've just voted for, 10% of $1 billion, which was their cost share, to do this tunnel, and it's not working. So Seattle has this green factor, which is neat. So different types of practices, like buyer retention might get 20%. Green roof might get like 40% of the area. You take it and multiply it. It's pretty easy to do. And so that gives you like a green, product. And so you have a certain sliding scale. Now, actually, we're working with them to help quantify that stuff right now. Toronto, for example, you have cities where they're really taking a look at, urban heat island, stormwater, energy, CSO. So the question is, get people asking the right questions. Okay, it's not long just about, did it reduce TSS 80% and everything else works just fine. It's about all these other ancillary issues, which I think are driving more of the economics over time. For example, like stormwater battery park. So exactly, 2.5 inches of rain essentially, and you have to use it. Okay, and so that's what we're trying to do. It may not be just a green roof. Maybe use a cistern, maybe use secondary water to do that. And like I said, one of the challenges is that all this sounds good, but we have to have ways to look at the effectiveness of it. And I think one of the challenges is going to be is that we could say, okay, we're going to do our whole city, and all the green roofs will be new roofs will be green. Okay, but when you look at a green roof on a roof, it's not 100% coverage. You got mechanical, you got all these other things on the roof. So most places it's not, maybe 40-50% is actually a green roof by the time you get with all the mechanical stuff. So And then you have to look over scale over time. So what really happens is that it may not probably be effective in many cities as you would think, especially things that are fairly stable, because we're talking about rebuilding infrastructure. It takes a long time. Okay, so you have to balance and figure out how to write that into your permits and economics. And then just a couple more slides to show some examples. This is US EPA headquarters, and it was interesting. We bought in there about 6 years ago, and this is actually the designed this courtyard. And in my 20 years of practice, this courtyard I'm going to talk about took the longest to design and build of anything I've ever built in 20-some years. It took almost 5 years to do. So that's our bureaucracy at work. But I always found it interesting. They brought us in to do a master plan of stormwater retrofits. And I was looking at headquarters complex, like 12 acres. And I always thought it was great. EPA headquarters, no stormwater management on site. Okay, so they brought us in and we did this math. So our first site was this courtyard. And what we did is there was a drain that goes out to CSO. And so we disconnect that water. And actually under this glass kind of dome there's this big cistern, big tank. And the water gets redirected to the cistern. We've got permeable pavements, concrete, blocks, bioretention. So it all feeds into the cistern. What doesn't get absorbed in the landscape or in the pavement underneath. And it's used for irrigation in the summertime. So, you know, what we're trying to do, and we're actually monitoring this now to look at the runoff. So we're trying to keep all the water on site. And actually, this site was pretty interesting too. It's a historical site. Whenever we dug down more than 2 feet, we had to call an archaeologist because there were all these old foundations underneath there. This was apparently was the red light district in Washington in the 1860s, and I don't know what they were thinking they would find here. There's some old crushed plates and stuff, but we had to, so it took some time during the construction. But the thing is here is that what we're trying to do is make kind of a self-sustaining site over time. And then, actually, if you're interested, we worked, if you just type in Anacostia Waterfront Corporation standards, we have about a 20-page list of environmental standards, performance-based, that can, pretty universal concepts that can be used. We just finished that up, which is really nice for restoration. And then, like I said, Emeryville has got a really nice ordinance here you should download because they're trying to really do redevelopment and do it smartly. And like I said, these templates can exist on all kinds of green roofs and trees and all this kind of stuff. And so I think it's possible to really develop the sites. I'd like to kind of finish up talking about kind of what I call green infrastructure evolution. So how many of you if I asked everybody in here green infrastructure, I would probably get 25 different answers over time. So what we're really doing is trying to work now. We just signed an agreement, actually it was kind of neat, with NRDC, EPA, National Association of Water Quality Agencies, and the SWPCA, which I don't know what all that means. It's some stormwater group that's all over the place. But we kind of signed this joint agreement to work on really defining and looking at green infrastructure for stormwater and CSOs. And so what we're trying to do is use kind of all the open space areas in a community and throughout a watershed as a driver, okay, for partnering and leveraging and looking at stormwater. Okay, what traditionally we all talk about the watershed approach, but what's the driver? Okay, what makes watershed approaches happen? And you know, when you have 5 communities in a row, trying to get them to agree to how to manage a watershed, pretty tough. Has anyone ever done that? I don't know. I mean, it's pretty tough to do. So we're looking for common things. So open space is a very convenient way because people want to protect parks, recreation, and it's really an untapped resource to really look at, you know, filtering and protecting. And so we're trying to really use this across watersheds and come up with management strategies. And so we're really trying to use it. One thing, forested areas, riparian areas are usually looked at as just totally off limits, right? And we have buffers and stuff, but we're still putting all this energy and pollution into them. So what we want to try and do is make them kind of functional if we can, where the opportunities exist, okay? And kind of integrate, like I said, integrating these not only as stormwater, but we can even say, you know, carbon sequestration and air quality and all that stuff. You know, especially with revegetation, there's lots of opportunities. So what we're trying to do is really looking at availability. You know, how many people in stormwater, you know, there are lots of communities across the country starting to use recreational funds to protect water resources, okay? But most people in stormwater program wouldn't think of that, okay? So there's lots of untapped, like I said, resources. And so what we're trying to do is create this series of links and hubs using open space, roads, really create this network. So that's kind of a new thing that we're actually just kind of start work. And for example, this Coyote Creek watershed, and I think these are great principles. Start upstream, start at the top of the watershed, connect the dots, really look at connectivity, use natural systems as a guide, all fronts and back. It's more of an urban planning thing. And then managing for the long term, and then trying to adjust these multiple objectives. So I thought this was good. If you looked here, they looked at really historically how this Coyote Creek looked. Okay, there's obviously not much. And this is, you can see Pacific Ocean, it's down. Orange County, there you go. So, that was the watershed. And then, so how do you kind of do the development? So for example, here's a fairly large area of schools, mixed use, riparian connection, applying those principles. And then trying to go from this, right, down to this kind of a system. Okay, so it's possible to kind of work with disconnectivity and these green systems and restoring that function. And then the next thing is I'm real excited to is green highways. Okay, so roads aren't going to, as actually some landscape architect who works in my office found this picture I thought was pretty good. So we're looking at this as 3 theme areas. And this is a partnership between EPA and Fed Highway that we're working on, and looking at really watershed-driven stormwater, recyclables and reuse, and conservation ecosystem. For example, the coal slag people, they're real interested in this because they got lots of coal slag, right? So can you use it in roadways and, and so there's lots of opportunities for recycled concrete, and products and the permeable concrete people. So there's lots of really industry acceptance. And so how can you design roads? For example, this one, a historic prison, this is something we worked on, got a National Trust and we award, okay, like 2 or 3 years ago. And they're permeable pavements along the street and this kind of structural soils that UC Davis, kind of a variation of it. So all the water kind of runs off into that, right? Okay, so it's really environmental infrastructure. This project where we took storm drains and we just made them a little bit bigger, and we put this kind of advanced treatment media in them, instead of just kind of letting the stuff settle out. We put some activated carbon, some oxide-coated sands to really do these like super absorbent chemistry in the products. And it's funny, we put these in as a retrofit, and one of the cool things about this is, and especially in urban areas, is disruption. When you have big boxes and stuff like that, you can be shutting down businesses, but we found that we could actually, saw cut this stuff, be above the utilities, and put this stuff in within a couple of days. And it was really interesting. They were supposed to have construction inspectors here, but the contractor went in a holiday and just shut all the lanes down when nobody was around, and built some of the other stuff here. And it's kind of interesting, the whole construction aspect of it. But so we were able to quickly put this in. But one of the things is this design doesn't meet any of the Maryland's criteria for stormwater, or this pre-treatment and all this stuff they have, but it was at least 10-15% performing better than any of the designs of BMPs they had for urban areas. So, and that's one of the big challenges. How do you get new products and new approaches into something? You can see here how it looks. It just fits right into the streetscape. And then, so what we've been doing is actually developing these. This is the Anacostia waterfront where we work a lot, and we've got about 15 practices in where we've put them into the street design standards. What we're trying to do, how do you integrate this? So for example, here, this is a new project we're working on. There's this really nice parkway, and that's gotten all kinds of money. This is like in the worst, you talk about this like area of town is like the worst part of DC, just about. And actually when we have to work there, we have to have a police escort. We've decided they have to actually stand by us because there's this incredibly high crime rate. But what we're doing is that this park system is kind of getting redone, and we're putting those techniques in the street on this Nancy Helen Burroughs area. So what we're doing really is integrating the environmental stuff up into the upper part of the watershed. That's part of this. And then just like really one last slide is that to have this like sustainable community, this is like because you have to have all these little bubble diagrams. You have this balance of economic, environmental, community development, and you tie that in, and that's what we're trying to do is really use this green highways, green infrastructure. We're trying to expand all this into stormwater, into wastewater, kind of these green technologies. And what we're really doing is managing, we're trying to marry green and gray, because that's what it's going to be about. Okay, we're not going to have communities that are going to go all green. Very difficult to do that. We still need some conventional infrastructure. So we're either bridging or enhancing kind of our common, what we're trying to do as these systems.